Sure.
a small little philanthropic new mascot, a gift for the community. So I want to
6.3.
Sure, that's great. Thank you.
I love that World Frog Day is continuing business.
All right. So we've got a motion to approve the agenda. Seconder, in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes. Motion. Maureen, seconder, Don. In favor? Carried. Public comments. The gallery is full, but they're all silent. And so next is delegations. We have Will Burrows, BC Youth Oil Management Association. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I'd like to thank ECAAC for the opportunity to come and speak to you about used oil recycling, and Bonnie, who invited me over initially, so thank you for that chance. I hope to share with you a little bit about the work we're doing in British Columbia regarding used oil recycling, and our hope is that you might consider providing collection for your community over here. And we can talk about how that might look and who might be involved. So if you're not familiar with GLUCOMA as the acronym, I've got a presentation here, if I can see it. We're a non-profit stewardship agency, so not unlike Encore Pacific or the Bottle program or the Product Care Association, so similar along the lines of that. We manage the collection and recycling of lubricating oils, antifreeze, oil filters, and the plastic containers that they're supplied in for the entire province of British Columbia. It's a collaboration of manufacturers and first sellers, so the people who manufacture and sell the oil and the products have an obligation to make sure there's an opportunity for that material to be collected by the general public and have somewhere for it to drop off, and we manage that obligation on their behalf. We have 285 facilities or collection points located across the province, and they may include local government facilities, return it depots, some of the lube shops, and some other facilities, people who sell oil, providing that service. So the public can go to any of those locations. There's a locator on our map and on the Recycle Council BC, and find a location in the community nearest to them. In 2018, we collected over 50 million litres of used lubricating oil across the province, 2.5 million litres of antifreeze, 6 million oil filters, and 1.5 million kilos of plastic containers. This map shows the facilities that we have across the province. And we know that convenience is king when it comes to recycling. And today's consumers are more likely to recycle if there's a facility close by, if it's convenient, if it's clean, and with friendly, knowledgeable, trained personnel to drop the oil and materials off. In 2018, we had M&P perform an analysis of coverage to see that we were providing coverage in all the communities that we wanted to. And they actually identified Bowen Island as one of the communities that would benefit from having coverage. It came up in that study. The study is available on our website if anyone wants to see that. So we're here to work with you and see if there's an organization or the ability to provide this service to the community on Bowen Island. So I'll just talk a little bit about the products. So the oil, it's really a circular economy program in that all the products that we collect are recycled here in BC. The majority of them, I should say, not entirely, but the majority. So the oil that gets collected, that the consumers drop off at the locations, is consolidated into tanks, then gets picked up by an approved collector, and they then take it to a refinery. This is a refinery that is in North Vancouver, so the TerraPure facility, where they re-refine the used oil, and then it's blended into new oil products. and that oil goes back out on the shelf, and people who need oil purchase it again for their lubricating purposes. The antifreeze, similar story. There's a facility in Delta run by Green for Life, GFL. The antifreeze is all collected in drums. They then get carried in a drum truck or pumped out in a tanker truck, sent to Delta, and that gets redistilled here in the province and is sold in bulk back to the users of antifreeze, and it will end up back in your car engine again if you have an internal combustion engine car, and for the consumer to buy on the shelf. The filters, predominantly metal, they get taken to Delta as well. They have the remaining oil, the residual oil that's in there, squeezed out of it, and they're made into a bale. And then those bales get sent to a steel mill, where they're shredded up and smelted down and come back as new steel. That's the only thing that isn't actually refined, if you like, in British Columbia, because we don't have any steel mills. So that goes down to Seattle and is melted. And it comes back to British Columbia as rebar and as nails and other products like that. Finally, the plastics. So the plastic jugs and the pails that oil is supplied in, we collect those as well. They get taken to Merlin Plastics, who have a facility in Delta. They get ground up into smaller pieces. They get washed, turned into flake, and then that flake is then turned back into pellets, extruded and turned into pellets, and is sold as a commodity to make new plastic. In fact, a lot of it ends up going back into making oil jugs. So it really is, all the products we have work into the circular economy. Here's an example of a flake that's been centrifuged there just on the left, and then that's how it looks when it comes out, all different colours. And then it gets pelletized and made into new plastic products. These are some examples of the infrastructure that we've been providing through our grant program. This is Parksville Bottle Depot. So they're one of our collection facilities. And what you're seeing here is a modified sea container that comes with a spill tray in the bottom here to catch anything that leaks. It has a tank in the background here for collecting the used oil, and then there's space inside behind these doors to store the plastics and the antifreeze as well. Here's some examples of other sites where we have at different sizes. This one here is up in the Thompson-Nicola Regional District. They chose to build their own facility. So they've got a shed structure here with wire fence and a gate on the front, and we helped fund some of that cost for them. These are smaller units, so this is a 4-drum locker, suitable for a smaller community. This is another 20-foot container. Down the bottom you're seeing a 6-foot there, and I think this is a 10-foot here, and the one on the top is a 10-foot as well with a smaller tank in it. That's a facility in Nanaimo. So we install the signage on the no animals were harmed in the production of this. We install signage on to explain to the public how to recycle and what we can and can't recycle and the best practices for them. We also provide training for the facility, hands-on training for the site staff, so they know what they should be doing as well. We've done some work with some remote First Nations community. I just left this slide in. The federal government are helping a lot of the First Nation communities get on board with recycling programs, and oil is one of those. So we've been visiting a few remote communities and helping them with helping them set up with collection and also do some legacy cleanup from oil that they have on their site. So how could the Bowen Island ECAAC and COMA work together? Well, we'd like to share the knowledge and the importance about keeping these items out of the environment and that they can be recycled over and over again. We'd like to encourage the community members to seek out recycling facilities. So the nearest facility presently is in North Vancouver. There is a mechanic shop in North Van that accepts it. And then after that, you'd probably be looking at Burnaby Eco Centre. However, we are presently working with Metro Vancouver and hope to have the North Shore Transfer Station as a facility shortly, which would be more convenient for Bowen Island residents. We'd like you to consider establishing a return collection facility here on the island. Perhaps help us work with a partner, whether that would be the municipality, the recycling depot, a garage business, a marina, whatever you felt might be a suitable and a willing partner. And we'd like to ensure that all the program materials are managed responsibly at the facility and help us to provide your community with the options of recycling. And that completes my presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Do we have questions from members?
Well, thank you very much. I've got a few questions just about the details and then about how it might work on Bowen. First of all, about the recycled oil, so that's great that it's circular and you're recycling it. So when somebody buys new oil at a gas station,
Yes.
is a recycled oil branded as recycled or is all the same?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer because we don't get involved in the manufacture of the new oil. So we provide the oil, the opportunity for TerraPure and GFL to collect it and re-refine it, but how they market that is their business and not ours. So we don't get involved in that. I do know, however, that TerraPure are working hard to tell that story, to show how this oil is being re-refined in North Vancouver and how it's blended into new oil that's being sold. But in answer to your question, I don't specifically know if the oil container says on it this contains
So I don't care whether it does or not. I guess I'm wondering whether it just gets mixed in with regular oil. I mean, that's what I'm hoping. So
Yes,
it
well,
disappears.
I believe it does,
Yeah.
but I think it could be a good strategy for them to put recycled content on there because it has to reach certain specifications by the engineering standards
Sure.
to be sold and so on.
Yeah, a couple more. Just simple stuff for me. So I saw the plastic for antifreeze. So windshield washer antifreeze. I mean, I got one of those. I don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Can that go into regular recycling, or if I wash it like crazy, or does it need to go to some special place?
Right, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for the Recycle BC program, but I do know that the Recycle BC program will accept windshield washer and diesel exhaust fluid containers in their Blue Box program. So if you have a depot that works with Recycle BC, which is the curbside program in BC, they will accept windshield washer and diesel exhaust fluid containers in their program. It's empty.
Yeah. Okay, and one more. So to clean my bike chain,
Yeah,
it's
Love
horrible
it,
fluids.
absolutely,
And you run it through, and then you've got a bunch of muck.
for sure.
And I have no idea what to do with it. I buy ones now that say, instead of it being sort of oil-based, it's whatever. So I just let it sit in a bucket and evaporate. But I have no idea if that's the right thing to do, or I should be doing something with it.
So the program, the BC Used Oil Management Association program is set up for recycling used lubricating oil, not cleaning agents or water or fuel or any of those. So we have a list of products that are acceptable, and the cleaning agents you use to wash your chain wouldn't be acceptable.
Wouldn't be acceptable.
No, but I would think the practice you're using of just allowing it to evaporate is probably the best practice that you could take in that.
All right, now a practical question that has nothing to do with me. So on Bowen Island, I used to, back when I was a lot younger, climb under my car and do the oil change myself.
Right.
With my hands in the oil and all that.
And many people do that.
I never do that anymore, and I don't
Okay.
think anybody does. So on Bowen, we have one auto repair place,
Yes.
the automotive, and presumably obviously they do oil changes, so they have to do something with their oil. I presume they're part of your system, or what?
Well, so I met with Leo Automotive today.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And so did I.
Oh,
Okay.
So
So-
you're answering all the questions.
No, the answer, you should really ask them the question, but what they told me was, he collects the oil from his own oil changes, and he takes it to his supplier of new oil in North Vancouver, and he leaves the full barrels of used oil with them, and picks up new barrels of clean oil to take back to his cars.
So presumably, those folks would deal with it. They wouldn't just dump it down the drain, they would
Right.
take it to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it would just be easier for them then to do it on island. I would gather, I have the same thought, is that there's only the station, and
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do oil changes either. I mean, we take a car in, we get them to do it. So, I mean, I don't know how much use, I guess.
So I just wanted to see if I think, just gonna, because I talked to Louise
Yeah.
today as well.
That's-
But I just want to say that Louise McIntosh has been talking to Will, and Louise is very excited about the opportunity or potential opportunity. She couldn't be here tonight because she's trekking in Mexico. But I did get some stats from her, and so, like, and just anecdotally too, just walking around the island, being down at the dock, those big, they're filled with used oil containers, often down at the wharf, on our municipal wharf. We've got some big green, big large garbage cans, and there are oil changes done in the marina.
In the marina, oh.
And then, but Louise said she, per year, she estimates between 200 and 300 liters of oil.
How much does a barrel hold?
205 litres, so.
He's gonna,
Yeah, and so there's also, like, there's Eddie's Pit, there's a fellow up there that does a lot of work. There are people, because Louise talks to them, that do still change their own oil. Whether or not the automotive would want to take part, I don't know, they've got the system well
Yeah.
entrenched.
Yep.
You know, they may though for the containers or aspects of the recycling program. But Louise seems to think there is a need, and really doing that education with the marinas in particular, because those are almost filled. I don't know where they come from, but it's really tricky for Louise right now to get rid of the oil. It's a special
Right.
trip and the containers, and so she's supportive.
so it's 200 to 300 liters
Per year.
per year.
Yeah, so
And
it's not a
Well,
lot.
maybe you can enlighten us too, you know, there seems to be a question of how many people are still changing their oil, and I think it's probably an age issue. And, but do you have any data on
I wish I did, but I don't have any statistics to share with you about population based.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that there are more electric cars. We know that the population is moving into more denser urban areas and high rises, and so there's probably less people changing their oil. Perhaps the younger generation are less likely to change it. Car manufacturers now, if you buy a new car today, you probably go 10,000 kilometers rather than 5,000. So the trend is there's going to be less over time, but what that number is or how long it will be, we don't know. There are still people, as Bonnie mentioned, sort of marinas, they still generate quite a lot. I met with Andrew down at Union Steamship today. He's got a shed there with containers in. He provides that as a service to his customers,
Yeah.
and he takes that over to Vancouver when he goes. He says there's another marina down there as well. I met with Lee Automotive, and he mentioned the pit. There's a commercial operator in a pit, and I think he said there's a heavy-duty mechanic works up there as well, so they probably have some. I'm not sure what they're doing with their oil at the moment. And Louise gets questions. So people still have lawnmowers and weed eaters and things like that they may be changing the oil in. So we don't know what the quantity is, and we can size the appropriate equipment to meet the needs of the community if we move there.
Maureen?
You said that you had identified Bowen as a potential site for, why did you identify this?
So the study performed by MNP looked at different communities. They looked at population, they looked at industry in the community. So they categorized it, whether it was a town or a city or a village, and they mapped out across the province where they thought facilities should be located based on those metrics. And the study is on our website, so you can have a look, and it shows all the communities that they looked at and identifies the link. They looked at electoral areas as well.
Okay, thank you. And my other questions have been touched on already. They primarily had to do with the volume in
Yes.
the community and whether something like this would be worthwhile. So, can you give us a ballpark of the cost of one of your I'm assuming smaller systems?
Yeah, so the cost is nothing.
Nothing,
We provide it as a grant.
okay.
So essentially, you would apply for a grant from us, and we would gift the item to you. The only thing we ask is that you stay in the program for 5 years, and should you choose not to participate, we have the option of removing it and citing it somewhere else in the community, just so we still have that amenity available to people.
And what kind of training do people need in order to handle things?
Right, so there's no, the training would be offered by the collector and by ourselves, so we have an online training, there'd be some hands-on training on site for the staff as well. But there's no formal, like, witness would be good if someone had witness training. But there's not there's no requirement for any formal training, but we provide that because we know it's a good policy. And,
Well, just one last thing. You also mentioned in some of the First Nations communities that you were doing cleanup
Right.
of accumulated stuff. And I would imagine that there's a fair amount of accumulated stuff on this island where people just don't deal with that and it goes in the basement. You have heritage antifreeze down there.
I think our back shed might have a
Yeah.
So the training we provided, if there was a collection facility here, would help the operators identify that material and confirm that it is indeed lubricating oil and that it can be recycled. And so that would address that. The cleanups we've been doing were examples at Hot Springs Cove, where they have diesel generators to provide their electricity because they're not on the hydro grid. And so they have a great maintenance program. They've been changing the oil in these generators every 3 months for 10 years. There was no program to deal with the used oil. So we went up and pulled out 3,500 litres of oil that was stored in pails and tanks and barrels, some of which were rusting away. We hired a barge and took a tanker truck up there and a crew to help remove all of that, remove all the plastics as well, and set them up with proper collection and a system going forward.
Yeah, I noticed there was a depot on Graham Island in the Charlottes. That
Right,
were- yeah.
that's right.
And just, I was wondering about the ferries. I mean, obviously, somebody has to go over there, and then that's quite a big process, sending a truck over there.
Yep, we'd have,
or a
yep,
ferry ride,
it
and
is.
come back. So our little ferry route would not be a barrier or I mean,
No.
it interests me, you'd have to come on the Wednesdays, I guess.
It's a
Well, that's
dangerous
right.
cargo.
I'm not sure that it has to be dangerous cargo. It's not, it doesn't come under dangerous goods for that, but I'm not sure how BC ferries would classify it. So we could talk to them. But the sort of volumes you're collecting, we're probably talking once a year, maybe once every 6 months, unless there was a lot being stored somewhere else on the island that suddenly became apparent. So it wouldn't be a frequent.
And if the containers, so the containers might end up, the bulk of the
Right.
containers, so then would you make a trip over to
Yep.
collect just the containers as opposed to
Yes,
sending out?
so we'd work with the collector and make sure that the service routine is in place there, and maybe it would get hauled off with the pop bottles or something like that. We'd establish a system to
I just have one other thing, just a general comment is, we're really trying to decrease our emissions,
Right.
the climate action strategy, and just try to remove some of those trips that people
Yes.
might be taking off island. So it may have some really good emissions benefits,
Yep.
decreasing emissions. And one further comment, just talking both to the automotive and to Louise, is the one worry that they both have is that if you have a facility and you do really good education, people know it's there, that if it's not in a really secure spot, that people tend to come and just drop a big bucket of
Right.
something off, and you have no idea what it is.
Right.
So they both mentioned that being a problem, and so definitely security of some sort or citing is important. So these are the details that if we decide to move forward, we'd have to figure out.
Absolutely. Having the best practice would be to have a secure site and to have it staffed when it is open so that people can receive it. But we do have some facilities in remote landfills up in the Caribou and so on, where they're not manned and they leave them open because if you lock a container in a remote place, people think it's got valuable things in it and they just bust it open. So they leave it open. But with any recycling depot, you always run the risk that people are going to drop things off, whether it's oil
Yes,
or
that's true.
mattresses or something else that you don't take. So certainly that possibility exists.
I would just want,
Sorry.
we've got David, then Don, and
Okay.
okay.
So, thank you all, and I think my question's partly being answered. I'm just wondering how it all works. So let's say Louise Riviera will have a facility there, and then she's got staff, so, you know, she now has to put staff spending some time on it. It wouldn't be a lot of time because it's not, you know, it's not like empty beer bottles in terms of quantity.
Right.
But somebody needs to do that, and then you take it off, she takes it off? I'm just wondering how the process
It's a good question. So two things. One, we pay 30 cents a litre for all
Oh.
the antifreeze and oil that's collected.
Oh, okay.
So again, we're not talking a lot of money, it's only a small quantity. And we would, presently, we pay the transporters a credit for them to come and pick it up. But they'll probably tell us that the credit doesn't give them enough to take the ferry and the time off their route. So we would work out a system with them so that it was
Okay.
covered. So
Yeah, it was
it
really the
wouldn't-
compensation that I was trying to figure out.
Yes,
Who
it
does
wouldn't
who
cost
gets
it.
paid, and,
Right.
That sounds fine, thanks.
We'd make a special case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I basically have the same question. I'm just curious how the business model works. Like, if, where does the container sit? Who pays for where it sits? Who pays for staff? And
Right.
how much money do you give me for my oil? Or how much money do you make on a 200-liter barrel of oil?
Yeah, well, we don't make any money.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, no, that's
how it
good.
works.
Very, very valid questions. So we don't make any money. We handle the network to make sure that oil's picked up. And some of that, we pay the collectors to come and pick it up. So you would have an arrangement with a collector for him to come and pick up these materials from you on an agreed upon schedule. And you wouldn't have to pay him to do that. He would just come and do it, and then we would compensate him so much per kilometre for doing that. The oil, we don't get any money for the oil that he picks up. They get money for that when they recycle it and re-refine it into new product.
Okay,
I appreciate that the bottom of the facility is leak-proof,
Yes.
but then there's people that are getting them from their vehicles with these things. Do we keep the
Yeah.
spill kit on site then?
Yeah, we can provide spill kits for those on this.
and how about staffing? How much staffing does a small community need for, you know, you've dealt with other small communities. Do
Yeah.
you have some ballpark ideas?
So one of the reasons it works well with the depot model is that they have staff who aren't busy all the time. You know, they might be busy counting bottles, and then perhaps they'll go into electronics and it'll be quiet, and then they'll do oil. So if we're talking about 200 or 400 litres of oil a year, it's the amount of time it takes to undo the lid on the jug, pour that into the drum or the tank, and put the jug in a bag.
Yeah.
So I'll leave that up to you how long.
Yeah.
It's not difficult work, it's messy work, and we'll provide some gloves and so on to help with that. But as far as time, I would say it's more of a fill-in job than a full-time job for someone, certainly in a small community.
And so, thinking about it from our community point of view, the recycling depot and or Louise's waste management company would be the most likely partners here. And so that would be something we'd have to look into. But I think this is, I've been waiting for this to happen for years, you know, and, until recently I was changing my oil. So I do have, I think the other thing that might happen in a community like ours is there would be a number of people like me that have stored away in back sheds material that we'd love to get rid of, so there might be an initial gush.
Right.
But that's something we could
Yeah.
handle.
Yeah, we can certainly manage that, help you manage that. Yeah.
So what I was thinking, I mean, is just putting out there that in order for staff to move forward and sort of look at feasibility, you know, write a report to council, but basically maybe looking at possibly a recommendation from the committee to council, so the council could direct staff
Yep.
to explore the feasibility of establishing a recycling depot.
Yeah, can you formulate a motion?
That's what you just did.
You just did.
Did
And-
I?
Yes, but we,
Did you say a
we have
recycle-
our magic
Oil
fingers here on
recycling
that.
program?
Don?
Second?
Let's hear what we've got.
Council directs staff to explore the feasibility of establishing an oil recycling program.
With used oil, BC Used Oil
With-
Management Association.
I think the community collection program is nice.
Yeah.
Oil recycling community collection program? Ish.
Community collection program for used oil.
Okay.
Used oil. Yes, definitely. Good. Just in case somebody has a little oil well in their backyard. We don't want
I'm
that.
not telling you.
So we've got a seconder.
Could I hear the motion again?
That council directs staff to explore the feasibility of establishing a community collection program for used oil with BC Used Oil Management Association.
The committee requests the council.
That we recommend that council.
And we've got a seconder from Dawn. All in favor? Unanimous.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Yes.
thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Will. And so the recommendation will go to council. I'll keep in touch with you
Absolutely.
and let you know what council decides.
Okay, that's great. Any more information you need, be happy to
Thank you.
provide it. If you need to come back.
Thank you
All right,
so
thank
much
you.
for coming over.
And thank you, Bonnie, for making this happen.
Good connection.
Thank you.
All right.
And we'll catch that ferry, Will.
I will, okay. Enjoy the rest of your evening, folks.
Okay. Have a safe drive home.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 5, action items. This is where we've got a long list for us to go through. Review of action items from previous meetings. That's on page 8 of your package. Shall we just run through? So the first one is Bonnie and the ECAAC work plan. That's going. We're going to be dealing with that today.
So I tried to incorporate your suggestions from last time. There were a couple of highlighted spots, and I don't know if I captured everything, so if anybody wants to add more, I took out some names of previous committee members. And I highlighted, for example, on page 2 of the plan, under waste management.
I think we're talking about the
Oh,
work plan.
oh,
and
the-
I don't
Yeah.
remember
Oh,
Yeah.
specific one.
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
So
Oh, I'm so
this is
sorry.
more, is it being done and it's being done? Yep,
It's done.
yep,
Sorry about
yep. No, I-
that. Not on the right page.
Number 2 is Councillors Nicholson and Hocking, providing Bonnie information regarding the role of ECAAC in creating policy.
I don't remember,
I spoke with Daniel, the
Oh.
planner,
Yep.
about this. So what we were trying to remember at the last meeting was that at the time the introduction of the step code level 3 was being discussed, there was also discussion of revising the green building policy to reflect changes to the step code. And when we were having that conversation, it was also suggested that that policy be referred to ECAAC and reflect changes to water catchment practices, so rainwater collection and so forth. So it was, we were going to look at it through sort of a broader lens, not just building code changes, step code related, but also all of the water related issues. So Daniel said that he has begun work on that, and he doesn't need our help at this time. but when he's further along with the revisions to the policy, that it will be referred out to ECAAC and asked for suggestions, so forth. Yeah.
Thanks, Maureen.
So, to come.
Thank you.
Number 3, Bonnie is going to share information regarding upcoming Ocean Watch events.
Yes, and I did do that,
Yes.
and it was a good turnout. It was on Friday. It was a great turnout. It was a good event. Yeah. I think I shared it with the community.
Councillor Nicholson
Yeah.
shared articles on derelict vessels.
Yeah, did it. Interesting.
It was a good article.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
very good.
It was very thorough.
Made a lot of sense. You know, the last owner of the boat
Yeah.
is the one burdened with
Mhm.
decades of the boat.
Mhm.
And the change in the construction methods,
Yeah.
going to, what was it, fiberglass?
Yeah.
So that they don't break down gently.
Bonnie, you were going to ensure the $500 kill fee was going to go to Bone in Transition for the video project.
That's done.
Perfect.
So many tech marks.
Yeah,
we're
well,
good.
did lots of people.
And Bonnie, Will, did share the National Observer article about LNG ferries and electric ferries. Next is January. Bonnie was going to share the Grafton Lake Capacity Report.
I'm not
Yes.
sure what that is.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Capacity of what?
I don't know, I
Yeah.
have no idea what that
Oh,
is.
maybe
I would imagine water
it's
capacity.
water, I'm presuming, and
I
the
don't think so.
raising the dam or whatever.
Oh, is that the study that Chris agreed? I'm not sure what, does anybody remember the discussion that went along with that item?
I wasn't.
I always feel like I'm being
I-
slightly
No,
curious.
yeah, sorry, yeah.
I'll check in my
I
notes.
was there, but I'm sorry. Yeah.
I mean, I know that we're starting to do some exciting monitoring of the dam. Glenn, our previous interim director of engineer, he's a very experienced water guy, and Patrick. So we're starting to do some monitoring of the lake levels, and if it's actually atmospheric pressure, that then we change into minuscule just changes in depth of the lake. So we're starting to do some monitoring, collect some data, which is great, and that will feed into some our water management plans. So I'm not sure what that.
So this, I think, was in context with the capacity, with the 1050 Miller Road rezoning and how much water is there for Covey. That's where the action is, on the January 16th. So it says most members were in favor of rezoning the area for increased density in order to address housing concerns, but there was not unanimity. Concern was expressed regarding the rising population of Bowen Island and the potential lack of water resources to support such growth. And then it's got an action item for you to share this capacity report.
I don't think there's a single capacity report that we can point to and say, here it is. But the water issues are always addressed as part of our rezoning.
Yeah.
So there is a Covey water meeting on Monday with lots of information on the table if you guys are interested.
So we won't follow
Get
this
rid of it.
further.
Yeah.
Okay. In December, Denise was going to reach out to Jason Henderson to talk about using Hen Creek for water storage.
I didn't actually get a hold of Jason. I had two other sources that we're actively working with, and it's not and research I did on top of it, nobody's really looking at it for that kind of purpose. And one thing, I mean, there's a number of issues that don't comply with what we're looking for, so that wasn't a
Okay.
feasible idea.
Okay, so that one's,
Thanks for looking into
Okay.
that.
and then there's the Will Husby, Jeff Matheson follow-up on
Last year.
water conservation. And that is
I mean, Glenn doesn't even work here anymore,
That's,
so.
that's still ongoing, and I will finally meet with Jeff
Yep,
and we'll get this moving.
that got sidetracked a little bit, just simply with Alan's departure and
Yeah.
things like that, so.
Okay, great.
Oh, Carla, we're going to contact Carla if we have any other ideas about water grant funding options. And so let's keep that open forever.
Yeah, let's make that a future ongoing actions.
Yeah. So that covers that.
So, work plan.
Work plan.
Now I'm on the right page.
Excuse me.
And that starts on page 9 of your package. Now, Bonnie, how would you like to go about this? Do you want,
I think, I mean, we've looked at it many times. I know, Kelly and Dawn maybe haven't, but I know we've had it on the agenda for quite some time. I did try and incorporate suggestions, Kelly, that you provided last time. Dawn, some potential speakers in here. The one thing that I saw here, I mean, I definitely could, well, I've got the BC, I updated with the BC Used Oil Management Association, that presentation, determine suitable location for mitigation measures. But there is research best practices. One of the past committee members is going to be doing that, and that is connected with Denise. I've got you in here too, Denise, to connect with the Ready to Assist in Public Awareness. It's all around reducing plastic and waste and increase recycling of alternative materials. And I don't know if it was Mark or somebody was going to research some best practice models out there. I don't know if anyone wants to take that on. I just sort of wanted to maybe put a couple of names in the task member assigned column, if anyone wants to put their name there. That was one highlighted section. That was on page 2.
So my experience with that was that it kept falling flat. I had a few sources that were working on plastics, and I had asked because of the fact that they had more knowledge, but nobody was really working. I mean, it just wasn't coming together. If there was more support on that level, if there's somebody who wants to buddy up, or if there is another way to approach it, perhaps it would be more successful. Also, that could be encompassing doing research also at the same time, or doing some research or supporting that.
I'm sorry, just to catch up to speed, was this mainly to do with island-wide businesses, or looking at business models like the watering can, or a culmination of all of them?
I'm sorry because I wasn't here last year, and it's sort of something that was brought up last year, and I think the Ready Potato was one business that was involved with trying to reduce plastics.
And create an island-wide
Yeah.
awareness and support to change and transform the way that, especially disposable, containers and that were used. So that was one of the incentives, was that we could create some awareness and try to support small businesses to transform towards a more sustainable way with plastic, as well as creating awareness, different events that would help people reduce the use of plastic.
Because I've noticed a drastic change in the consumer plastics on the island. Most of them, like, they're single-use straws, and containers are compostable now.
That's right.
And then I was in the watering can today talking to her, and she's looking to expand her business, and so they're going to be approaching the municipality. I think it's the FDA that needs to approach the municipality so that she can expand into food and coordinating that. So I think that's another way that this can be supported.
The FDA,
Food and Drug Administration?
in the States.
That's US.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Apparently, she needs to get some permits or something, and that they need to approach the municipality for her to be able to, she needs to change her licensing. That was it.
Oh, her business license. Well, we'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, so,
But you're right, I mean, the businesses themselves are doing a lot of driving of change, and the consumers are right there along with them, or just a step ahead of them.
so is there a lot of work still to be done in this? Is there, I mean, there's always room for improvement, but is there something that needs to be actively pursued?
That's kind of what I'm wondering in looking at the work plan as a whole. Just in terms of priority, I mean, there are very few things on this list that we actually must do. And I think the only thing that we must do is file our CARIP report, is that correct?
I think it's so.
So for newer members of the committee, I think that that's really important to know when you look at this document. It's just that one thing. And in order to have something to say on it, we have to do some other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because the CARIP, is everybody familiar with the CARIP report?
What does CARIP stand for?
Action Revenue Incentive Program.
You got it. Yeah.
Did you say that slowly?
Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program.
Yeah.
So, we report.
There it is.
And so I think Maureen is exactly right, is that sort of, we like to have these community initiatives to report in our CARIP report, and then we get some money back from the community, and that's where we were able to give some money to Women in Transition and the Food Sovereignty Group this past year. So, so I don't know if that initiative, if there's.
Do you want me to look on this file here, like live?
Sure.
Yeah. So am I deleting something in here?
I don't know, I mean, I don't know, we need to research best practices. I think we did, maybe somebody could come up with some good news stories, maybe just a suggestion on what we've seen in the community, just as you were saying, Kelly, about the uptake of recyclables for single use. Like maybe just having some sort of a write-up or a little blurb about that. I know the sushi place doesn't use styrofoam anymore. They're using compostable. So, yeah. And the water cans.
And then the Ready, they don't use the vegetable bags anymore, it's all paper. And then also the Snug and Artisan Eats, they're all using compostable containers and things too, so.
And the general store has a box outside where you can pick up a reusable bag if you've forgotten one. So,
And the Ready isn't using plastic bags anymore either.
So the CARIP report has sort of two categories. One category is essentially municipal or corporate actions that we've undertaken, and the other is community actions. So all of those things where the community is being proactive can be captured and reported to, they're reported to the province, and the province shares all of that information to all of the reporting municipalities, and then in coming years you can kind of swipe ideas from other municipalities to see if they'll work in your place.
Okay.
so maybe it's already done.
Well, I
You
think
are
just,
just so
I'm hearing
fast.
that they were doing it, so that's coming out.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be deleted.
Yeah, I was just, I like the second bullet and the third column there. So,
Do you like that?
yeah.
So would you guys?
So-
And it's almost like the second bullet too, because the plastic bags, I mean, although there's not a ban, we're slowly
This is
moving
the-
away from
It's
them.
moving naturally.
So we don't need to,
Continue to work,
Mm,
because it's not done.
yeah, that's
Yep.
right.
yeah.
So that second bullet in the third column needs a body to go with it. Do we have a volunteer to gather that information and
What's the, where would this be published? What is the intent of, would this be something on the municipality's website? Is that what we're thinking?
I think it's part of the CARIP report too, in that it would be showing that the communities, this is the community action section. So, and I think it would be a great idea to have it on the municipal website, you know, what's happening in the community to this, for this objective. And so, it's important to celebrate the tiny steps we're making to be more sustainable, so.
The work plan also goes to council, and council takes a look at it and considers it in light of the strategic plan for the municipality as a whole. And on occasion, council gives feedback. It might be simply, this is great, keep going. It might be, you've bitten off more than you could chew. It might be, this is a priority that actually you guys should be thinking about. You know, so there's a back and forth that's anticipated. My gut sense, when this comes to council, is that the feedback will be, it's a bit too ambitious, and perhaps having 3 or 4 clear, actionable items might be better.
Yeah, and the overall plan is
Yeah.
emphasis.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the fellow who was here earlier on talking about the oil recycling, that's really important. And I would love to see that, you know, retained in this. And I think that if that's in our work plan and Bonnie's going forward asking, you know, can I do a feasibility study, then the likelihood of that happening is greater. But some of the other things on this work plan, looking at it through a council lens, we don't really have a very much of a role to play in it. Like the implementation of the STEP code, what are we going to do? It's being implemented. The building inspector and the planner are hosting meetings with the construction guys on island. That's all taken care of. So it's kind of paring this down maybe to the areas where we actually can have an impact might be more strategic, and it might give some clarity to the role of that staff ends up having in realizing some of this.
I think it's important to state too that there will be other things that just naturally come to this committee other than this, right? Like we're gonna be asked for lots of comments. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the last year we spent more time responding to requests from council than doing these actions in the work plan. So do we have an idea here about how to proceed? Should we go through and drive some wooden stakes through the hearts of the ones that we really wouldn't be can't contribute to?
Or just flag them as low priority,
Excellent.
good to do if we can get to it, but it's not the key components of the work plan perhaps.
Yeah, and then we could change the order based on that priority, prioritization. That's a great idea, Jim. So I'm going to suggest we start at the top and just do that first.
Okay.
You know, just high, low, medium priority or doability. Is that, or and with one that we could have a K as well for kill, just not Don
Yeah,
here.
just being a new guy, are these like etched in stone? Are these the priorities that the committees prior have decided are the most important things in the world we should be working on? Or are there things that we've discussed off camera or behind, you know? I mean, I've seen some memos about there's some correspondence between this group of things that I thought were sort of important that should probably go to the top of the list, like how much water's on the island.
Yeah,
But I don't see it there.
yeah. And I think I think the process could be go through the list that we've got, and I'll answer your question in a second.
Okay.
Go through the list with the priority, and then look for gaps that we think we should be doing that aren't covered. And Dawn, I think this is this list here is more of a bunch of us sitting down at the table here saying, how about this? Should we be doing this? I don't think this list is in a priority setting at the moment. Bonnie?
And I think this committee is new too. It's a fairly new committee. So I think initially, like, yeah, there were lots of things that we wanted to do. And I think so paring it down, I think is a really good idea at this stage as we start to gel as a committee and kind of get into a groove. And council is used to having us as a committee. And yeah, so I think it's just been kind of like we'd like to do kind of a wish list almost, as opposed to something concrete.
So should we just go through Bonnie and
How does everybody feel about that? That would be helpful.
Yeah. Okay, do you want to lead it or should I?
That would be great.
Okay, so they increase the use of non-potable water cisterns for fire protection and outdoor water use. Any comments on this as a priority?
So this is in the climate change strategy.
Yeah.
And council is interested in this.
Yeah.
If we change it, if planning would end up coming up with some sort of a recommendation about that, if someone in this group was able to do some of the research in terms of how much it actually would cost, that could be useful. But it would have to be carefully done. It would have to be documented and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of professional type work. But,
May I speak?
Yeah.
I had sent an email to Will about somebody who does this professional who was willing to mentor us and actually give us the stats, because he's on the board, he's on the CSA board for water catchments, and that information would be really easy to get, so we can actually do something pretty straight up with that, and that name is easy to get.
yeah. I mean, for us to do that, that would be useful to then send to council. Okay, here's some recommendations in terms of the sizes and costs and how much you need in an average garden, that kind of stuff.
So could we put that as an action for you, Denise?
Yeah, if you want me to, but we've already spoken very briefly
Yeah.
about maybe having you come in and you can talk to
Yeah.
us and answer, just like what Will did tonight,
Yeah.
and have him come in for 20 minutes and talk to us about it, and we can ask questions and take it from there. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, and can we get you to
Yeah, I
talk to
can
them?
set that up.
Great, thank you.
Can we begin at some point as far as organizing their coming to the meeting?
Yeah, I'll send
Once
you.
you establish that, I will help you with it.
So it sounds like this one might be priority one then, David, that's what you're advocating for, and I think
Well,
that
haven't gone
sounds,
through the rest of them yet, but
Yeah.
this could be a useful thing to do.
well, yeah, I should say top tier rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
the first
I
thing,
see.
I should say, yes.
So I put
Yeah. Category one.
H beside,
Yeah, yeah, hi, yeah.
Hi. The only thing I'd suggest is, I don't think an advisory committee can do things like increase the use of non-potable water, blah, blah. But I think with support, if we put support in front of that, that would be what we would be doing.
So I think it would be support the use of.
Support the increase of the use of non-potable water. So, so the action that Denise is going to do would be providing more information to staff and council about ways of going about that. So that would be our support function.
Okay.
Next one?
Before we leave that, can I just put that in the context of some other work that is going to be done in the coming year, which is that we are having a water plan developed for the island that will be done in at least 2 phases. And some of the work that is done in that plan you might end up feeding into, but the responsibility for creating a water plan for the island would not rest with this committee. And I think that that is important to recognize, and also it might mean that our role in researching some of this, that this might be lower in priority because there's that larger piece of work that's being done with significant money going into that as well.
I like the idea of having presentations becoming knowledgeable.
Yeah.
I really like that. That to me is a doable thing that we can do. And so I'd like to keep that as an action item. That's what I see. But I think, and then seeing how we can move forward in tandem with the
I
water
think
plan.
it will certainly be able to support or inform what's going on there anyways, in some way. So I think that it's just a preliminary.
So I don't know about the bulk buying, Carla. I know Mark was working on that, and I was away and I came back, but I think the doable thing that we can do, be realistic. Everything else that's going to come to the committee, all these plans that are being developed, good work that's going, is that Denise organize a presentation so we become knowledgeable of the options available.
And I think I'd like to keep the second bullet there, that I plan to research what's going on in the islands, trust the other islands, because,
They might be here.
yeah, and they certainly are working hard on that too, so.
So do we like those crossouts there?
Yep.
And then is it medium or low?
I think it's a maybe, because I think it is so doable that I don't think it's the highest priority, but I think it's a medium. Would you say about that?
Yeah.
Delete the crossouts.
So did it go from a high to medium?
Yeah,
Okay.
because of the island-wide master plan that's
Okay.
happening.
But is there an island-wide master plan?
It's coming out, yeah.
It's being done.
It's in process.
Wow, that moved quickly.
Well,
It's in the budget,
Yeah.
and there is a person identified to do the
Okay.
Is
so
it
should
possible?
we acknowledge that in this then, like support it, or?
Is it possible that this maybe isn't a strategic item? We've got a couple of actions that arise out of it that could be very informative, but I wonder if it's a strategic item that the committee is charged with. And if there might be other things that rise higher than it because of the factors we just talked about.
Shall we move to the next one?
So I think this is quite important.
Yeah.
And so I met with a couple of folks, the president and another person in the garden club. And so they're going to have, I mentioned this last time.
Yep.
So, yeah. So they're going to have a couple of garden club meetings on both the plants, xeriscaping, plants that are nice and showy, but don't use a lot of water, and also on equipment, with people like the Valley or
I
whatever.
think McKaylee corrected us on
Yeah.
xeriscaping.
It's not
changed it. I
xeriscaping,
changed
it'll be
it.
desert plants then, and they're not gonna do well here.
Yeah,
drought tolerant native plantings, I changed.
Yeah, and then I had sent in an email a couple of suggestions on, there's several nurseries in the Lower Mainland area that specialize in native plants, and they might be quite happy to come and do a presentation as well. And then also reclamation as is a facet of what we do. So there's biologists out there that put together planting plans and things like that for native vegetation for landscaping. And so there's, I included some language on that too.
I think I might have forwarded your note to the garden club, but maybe I did, I don't know. I should check that, because I should do that. Because they're the ones, you know, I mean, they have events, and they go to people's houses, and they look at what's
Right,
going on.
exactly. And so there's a couple of biologists here on the island. Their name escapes me at the moment. Nick and Cynthia? No.
Nick Page.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so they had a couple of, their website came up and they have a couple of restoration plans that they've done, so that's something local that would be good to.
Be awesome for that, then we can promote that.
The garden club, can anybody attend those
Yeah,
presentations?
yeah, they can join,
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the garden club is big. I did a presentation
Yeah.
there, and I was, oh, this isn't the nature club, yeah.
So, yeah, so I guess that's the garden club. I think that's maybe like, I don't know what this committee's gonna, other than the great ideas that you've come up with, but I don't know our role in that. I guess just liaising with the garden club to come up with
Yeah. I mean, they're the ones
good
that put an
speakers
audience
that would.
together, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we could get 11 people, or they can get 30.
But that's part of the partnership
Yeah.
with the garden club. That's a great partner. So that's level, high, medium, and low.
So I'm just, it might be easier to rate them after we
Yeah.
finish. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure what else needs to be done.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
think
just-
that's pretty much done at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Well, except McKaylee's great suggestions about speakers and that kind of thing. And I'm sure the nature club's always interested in looking for good speakers and
Yeah.
topics. So I think even David continuing your liaison with them.
Yeah. There's also, like, there are some good websites, like Metro Vancouver has a Grow Green website. And, I mean, we could popularize things through other groups, such as Bowen Transition or something like that, I suppose. Materials like that.
Yeah. Okay. Expand water conservation education to include children.
I was thinking maybe with this one that, Carla and I could do another, I don't know if it's gonna be the committee so much unless the committee wants to get involved, but it might just be that, like we're doing a frog amphibian habitat presentation tomorrow, Friday with the kids, whether it's just doing a education piece on water as well with the kids. But that's, I don't know, maybe, I mean, definitely could inform or help. But I'm not sure, because as far as the second point here, consider working with local filmmakers to produce, I mean, I think that's a great lofty ambition, but it's not gonna happen this year. I don't think with.
No more working with
I'm just surprised that there's nothing that's already been done.
Can I make a suggestion? We've got CARIP funds,
Yes.
and we have done the CARIP funding just sort of on a kind of ad hoc basis. You know, there are people in the wings, and they're potential candidates. What if we use those CARIP funds as a competition to get some things done that might not otherwise get done? So if we actually did want a kid-friendly video about water conservation, what if we pitched it and saw who came up? Yeah. I mean, it might be the same group that proposed videos and in the past, it might be some other group, but just, that might be one way of approaching the CARIP, the disbursement of the CARIP funding that essentially works as a bit of an incubator for good ideas.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a good one, because I think it's come up as a discussion. I know Denise, you were, talking about water schools and just having something for kids. And so maybe that is a good, because we were going to discuss later tonight in the agenda $1,500, so that's nice linking it in, and that might be a good use of money. That's a good
Pitch
bit of
for
money to
video.
make a nice video.
To pitch for a video, you have to have kind of a plan already set up as to how that's going to go. Do you have any idea how that would go? You
No.
have to send it to the community. You have to have, people to send it to.
But I'm not saying specifically, let's do a video for $1,500. I'm saying, let's think of the CARIP funds as a potential resource, and we could ask people to pitch their ideas. It could be a video they want to do, it could be something else altogether that we're not imagining.
And maybe it's getting a subcommittee from this to look at those solutions, right?
Yeah.
Just like we did with the communities.
Exactly, yeah.
So do we have an action here that,
Another thing that I would like to contribute is that the GBRD has a eco training class. They have a bunch of park interpreters that do classes and things, and part of their mandate is to actually service Crippen Park. So I, as a homeschooling mom, hired a couple of their park interpreters to come over to Bowen and give the homeschoolers a talk on some of the ecology here. They met us in Crippen Park and had a great couple of hours educating the kids. They actually have a water conservation session that's a 2-hour session. So maybe it's as easy as getting them to come over for the salmon release and do a conservation thing in Service Crippen Park at the same time. It's a $200 fee for the couple of hours, or it's $120 for a couple of hours.
When is the salmon release?
It's usually April, May.
It's coming, yeah, we just received the eggs, this last batch of eggs. We just sent out 100,000 into the water a few weeks ago.
So a couple of years ago,
It's
GBRD
actually
had some park
later.
interpreters
Probably be late.
to the salmon release, and they did a different section. So maybe they would just do a water conservation component this year at the same time.
Do you want to make that an action item for me? I sit on the Parks Committee, so
Okay.
I can ask if they would do it in a
and
council.
they definitely had staff for
Yeah.
cold programs many times.
So, I mean, it's on the GBRD website. If you look at their programs, they offer home learning, so they'll send a couple of park interpreters over.
And Maureen's on the
Good idea.
Metro Park, so just not our parks, the Metro Parks.
Okay.
She's our, the staff for the council liaison
Yeah.
for Metro
But
Parks.
I'd be happy to ask about that, and that would cover off
That's
some of
great.
the,
That'd be awesome.
that would cover off that item
Yeah.
here.
And they were
Good.
really great. They were awesome
Yeah,
I
kids.
bet they
and-
were.
I'm gonna blast through, we've got lots to do and reduce off-island transportation by increasing at-home composting and reducing overall waste.
So we got a whole composting initiative that the municipality is in the middle of, and so it kind of we've got a great presentation. It's now being studied further. It'll go to the, financial side of it, business plan will be analyzed. There's some further consultation with the public, so all that's moving forward by the municipality.
And so if I see two options with this, it's being done, or the at-home stuff is still an option that could be integrated with the new on-island composting, so that
I think it probably will come out naturally, I think it will be unfolded. So just putting it out there, I think that maybe it could be taken off
Okay.
for this year.
So-
Just because we're really working as staff
Yeah.
on on composting
Yeah.
and the at-home part is.
But to be fair, some of the energy for this did come from this committee
Yeah, it
a
definitely
year or
did.
so
It
ago.
definitely did.
And I think I ended up taking it to council, yes, so.
There you go.
So, feather in our cap. So,
Yeah, I'm not saying that if we don't move forward as staff, or if we don't get to the home composting, we can put on work plan next year.
yeah, I think let's not get in the way of this initiative, so, and any comments from others? Okay, so that one gets struck for this year. Reduce plastic waste and increase recycling of alternative materials.
We're back on this.
Back on this one, we've discussed it.
I mean, we've got some businesses that are basically taking the lead on this, and everybody else is, you know, the island wants to do it, people want to do it, and it's sort of a nice convergence, it seems.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not sure what our little.
Yeah. Ellen McIntosh, from the manager of the Ready Potato, came and
A couple of years
did
ago,
it.
one with the weeds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're doing it, so.
Yeah.
If needed, next year, we can do whatever is needed on this topic. So that's another one reduced?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think so.
Yep.
The federal government is investigating, they're going to ban some single-use plastics, they're figuring out which ones right now.
One of the things that Metro Vancouver is doing a lot of work on right now is recycling textiles,
Yes.
Yes.
which is huge in
Yes.
terms of
Yes.
the water consumption to make the textiles to begin with, and then the waste. So they've got a PR campaign that we could pick up on. And I know that there would be interest on our island to do textile
Well,
recycling.
that's just, yeah.
And nobody's put their brain to that one yet. That might be a fun thing to.
And that might be a good carrot, maybe, because there's a couple of people now that do a lot of repurposing clothes. There's a couple of people that are really, really good at it. So maybe even reaching out to them, they might be interested in utilizing some of the funds to do some sort of project with that, or
Yeah.
liaise with us.
Yeah.
That's such
Yeah, I'd like to see us make some
Okay.
progress on it. I don't know what we would do, maybe
So,
cure it.
Don, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I don't want to be contentious, but plastic and waste is one of the big things that we talk about regarding, you know, what we can do to make a positive change in the environment. And I can't imagine why we would take it off the list. I don't think it should come off the list.
I would like to see it shift maybe now that the businesses are on board, sort of approaching more of an individual household, reducing plastics. I don't know if anybody else saw the movie, the Bowen Island Film Fest, Harmony, where she talks about going zero waste for her household. But maybe approaching that and something to strive for.
Excellent point.
So what would our role be?
Maybe from an education standpoint.
Like
And how to do it, right? So instead of using the plastic bags at the bulk food, this is where you can purchase bags that you can reuse, like the cloth vegetable bags, or having textile reuse. You can actually make grocery bags out of old t-shirts. It's quite easy to do. So then that addresses some of the textile recycling or upcycling, as well as reducing plastics, bringing home. And then also the other source of plastics is, educating people about buying fruits and vegetables and how, like, cauliflower and cucumber is constantly packaged. I went to the Ruddy today, and as much as they don't have plastic bags for stuff, all of their lettuce is wrapped in plastic.
So what is our role? Is it
I would think
solely
more
in
of an
education?
education, yeah.
Now, this is a big challenge to us. are we an advisory committee or are we an action committee? So that's the question. And we'd have to look at our mandate here. I think as an advisory committee, our role would be to talk to staff and council about the importance of this, and that there's lots of options that should be looked at, and here's some examples.
Right.
I think that would be the thing, and again, identifying partners that the municipality could be working with for education, and it could be on island, it could be Metro Vancouver, provincial, national. Bonnie?
We can have a climate conversation around just what we're talking about. That would be an action that we could organize.
Yeah.
We could, so what all the great stuff that you just said that could be what we could do this year. I think as we could organize, I don't know, maybe it's a couple of different speakers at a climate conversation about textiles or bags or plastic.
Another idea I have, certain issues come up depending on the community itself. But mostly we have perhaps areas that are generally easy to access and we can do certain things. I'm wondering about looking at how other communities look at the issue of plastic and maybe find a community that matches ours in terms of demographics and interests, and seeing if we can maybe find ourselves in there and pull ourselves into an action plan that would actually serve us. Because, I mean, yeah, we're naturally going there, but I think that we can bring it up a little bit and make more awareness of the fact that we haven't actually done anything to move ourselves into a plastics-free environment. And that was part of the initiative with Ready. Ellen was really into it. We were talking about it, but a lot of different things get in the way to being able to get to where we wanted to go. So if we had a plan that, or support or mentorship, or even talking to another community that's done it, that has ideas that we'd be interested in. So maybe a little study on that level as to what can we do to bring ourselves up in general.
So, yeah, and I always have to go back to council's strategic priorities too as staff. But I'm voting member here, but so I'm wondering, is that something that you would be willing to do?
I'd be interested in looking at, what other communities might be, have done certain things.
And
that
report back to
I can take a look at that, look at the islands and see what's done.
for us, education's good.
So we have a list of 16 communities that we look to when we're thinking about issues, things, places like Tofino and Euclid and Whistler and Pemberton. So I think staff would have access to the list of the comparatives. And sometimes you throw in a couple of others just because you know they're.
Did you know someone there?
Yeah, sometimes you might think that they're doing something interesting. And if it were focused on, are you handling plastics? What kind of successes? How did you get there? What are the warnings? I think that would be really useful.
Yeah.
I think council would be interested in seeing that.
Thanks.
If you need support with that, please, please reach out. It's something I'm trying to do at home, so.
Okay. Reduce off-island transport related to
Hey,
oil.
right?
You've done that.
Oh, I've got a funny name, so.
So that's done.
What?
Reduce off-island, the next one, reduce off-island transport.
I don't know, it's
Not
done.
done.
Like, I just said it's been typed in a draft.
I think we've done what we can do as an advisory committee. We talked to an expert, we've
But if we did it in
made a motion
2020,
to
it isn't even
council.
on, so council sees.
Again, it's, when we say reduce, we should have some modifiers to that,
Yeah.
but, Bonnie, you were gonna say something? And then Dawn?
I was just gonna say, you may even wanna change the wording, but just that staff will sort of take it from here, but I definitely may need to use the expertise around the table to come back with, some little bits and pieces that I
Yep.
really
Aren't we simply making a recommendation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, have we made that recommendation?
Yeah,
Okay.
We made that motion
Yeah.
today.
So we said that, we recommended that council direct staff to look into the feasibility of.
So just for clarity, when do we let go of something? I mean, if we come up with an idea or something we think we should recommend, and once we recommend it, do we just let go of it and pretend it's been done?
It would depend.
Okay, I'm just curious. I mean, I just worry about letting go of things
Yeah.
and having them come back and hit us in 5
If
years.
we send it off to council and then council takes a whole lot of serious action, then we can be very happy and say.
But if council
If
says.
council says, well, we'll do that in 5 years, thank you very much, we think about it again,
Yeah,
then we
that's fine.
have to rethink and do something different.
Yeah, it's like being a junior government that's a subset, has a subset of responsibilities of a senior government. Well, it's a bad analogy,
No, but I get it.
the point being,
I
it
work
is,
for, yeah,
yeah,
I understand how government works.
yeah, so we can make the suggestion and say it's a really good idea and here's why, and then it really is out of our hands. We can keep on saying those things or find better ways of saying it if we're not seeing any action.
Okay, but my point is, we could be a thorn in council's side, you know,
Yeah,
and not to be unkind,
yeah,
but if we as a group believe in something strongly enough,
yeah.
you know, we should not let go of it. You know, and as long as we can back it up, and, you know, council may say we don't want to hear that anymore, or we don't want to talk about it, but it still may be an issue.
It quite possibly could be. With the recommendation that we supported at the beginning of this meeting goes to council as part of our minutes, and it gets built into the council agenda, minutes attached, and the recommendation is pulled out, and it's addressed. It's either put on a consent agenda and it passes, or it is on the agenda, and if there's discussion, David and I have to speak to it and give background on, you know, what the committee was thinking at the time, and council might accept the recommendation, might send it back to us and say, can you explain more about what's going on, or it might defeat it, in which case it's generally not helpful to keep going back to council, in part because we're an advisory committee. And usually the things that this committee feels passionate about, I think it's safe to say that the recommendations that we come up with would find open ears at the council table, for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all we can hope for. So that's-
Okay,
So do we want to keep this write a blurb about island businesses changing their practices into include it? No?
Yeah.
So you can take Denise, connect with Brady on that, I would say.
I think they're doing a really good job themselves of
yeah,
getting the word out.
yeah.
And, you know, action speaking louder than words, people are seeing the change.
Yeah.
So we're taking island businesses out and then economic development committee doesn't really need to be our records?
Well, the island businesses are already doing it, so they're, title of that.
Is that something with?
Partnership.
It was that Ellen's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, partners in this or other communities, I guess. Yeah?
Yep.
Put in or add in the textile recycling.
So I have that in there, as for the climate conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Households.
Yep.
So we don't really have a person on that.
The climate conversations are down lower, I
Okay.
think, and I've sort of put Maureen and myself
Okay.
names.
Sorry, so we're back on that used oil.
Okay.
So. Okay.
Okay. Where are we now?
On building
Education.
efficiency?
We could continue that action of explore Pender Island's buying group of heat pumps. I would be the action person because I'm a member of that group.
Does building and transition move forward with that? Do you know?
I don't know.
I don't think so from our conversation with them that day. I could check into that and see where they're at, yeah.
Sorry, Bonnie's gonna check with building transition.
I mean, this is retrofitting older homes is really important, and it's an important part of the climate change plan. It's another sort of, if we got some real experts who have some opportunities, and it's another opportunity for climate conversations if we brought somebody like that in, somebody who can tell us how you can do all these things, and who you can talk to, how much money you save, when you return on, what your return on investment will be like, and stuff like that. Because most of us just ignore that, and it's something we all should be doing.
And the other value of the Pender Island group, I went to a presentation they did on Boone a couple of years ago, and they talk about installers too, and, which is another gap in community knowledge. Is Clara still on this committee? No.
Okay.
Yeah, she may come sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, when she's
She was just so good at I was looking at the second bullet, research other potential retrofit ideas and grants, and she's so good at
She definitely could help, for sure. Too, right?
Consider helping.
She's eager to help.
Okay. Should we forge on? Support conservation initiatives that assist with developing environmental protection tools.
The first bullet, review and comment, yeah, we do that as directed by council.
So the second bullet, I guess,
I think that, yeah, I think it relates more to, when applicable,
Yeah.
when something comes
Sounds
forward
like
to us,
that.
right?
Yeah.
When applicable.
I was wondering if, on that topic, if the action of encouraging council to have, enact tree retention bylaws and that kind of thing, is that too,
I think that there's a
Aggressive?
site alteration bylaw coming
Yeah.
forward. It's going to address some of the issues.
And we can review.
And
Yeah.
I think that as directed by council, when we get to review on subdivisions, rezonings, that we can look at the building plans
Yeah.
and encourage
yeah.
these practices.
Yeah, I found it really useful to be referred to, when we were referred to that increased density development on Miller Road there, that we could bring forward ideas like tree retention and encouraging um, design that allows infiltration of rainwater and that kind of thing. I think maybe that's,
So can you put in front of maybe when, as a, or when applicable, or
Where,
encourage retention, like just sort of when, because it's kind of relating to, yeah,
just call it like referrals?
yeah.
And the bottom point, are we as a group assisting with creation of sensitive ecosystems? Are we actually doing reclamation here on Long Island?
no. I think it's,
That comma shouldn't be there as all. I think it refers to the educational materials.
Just
Right.
Biodiversity, oh, thank you.
Oh,
yes.
what comma changed the
Yeah,
world.
that's right, yeah.
But are we going to develop educational materials?
You know what, I don't know about that this year. I don't think, I think there's so many things. I know we're already 3 months, you know, sort of
Yeah.
gone. So I think maybe if, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely on staff, we're looking at maybe producing some guidelines for shorelines, et cetera. And, you know, I definitely will keep this committee apprised of any educational materials that we.
Yeah. And so even assist, oh, it's already there, okay.
How are we feeling with the strike through?
Go to kill.
And if the committee has any ideas about education, I'm open to hearing them too.
Okay. So,
The shoreline protection was identified as being really important.
Is this marine shores or freshwater shores?
yes,
Oh, okay.
yeah, yes. That's, I would, and maybe McKaylee might want to be action people on that.
To do what?
What am I signing up for?
Well, I think what we'd be doing is working with DG Blair, with the Green Shores group, to develop, to do a workshop.
Actually, will,
Yeah.
yeah, so so I'm part of the intergovernmental working group for Green Shores,
Yeah.
and we belong to the Stewardship Center. We pay a yearly fee, so there's going to be a Green Shores workshop in the summer. We haven't determined, but I hope that everybody could come to that.
Yes.
So I don't know, I mean, love your help, but I don't know, I think
Yeah,
we've
okay.
still got staff level, but definitely,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's,
Let's-
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one's underway. We don't need to touch this
It's
one.
underway.
Yep.
It's underway. It's underway.
So, is this something that the committee is needed on at all?
Well, I think I might bring sort of the draft guidelines, and Carla, we probably need to
Yes.
look at that. Just maybe just a nice guideline checklist
Yes.
for shoreline protection.
Yeah, so instead of reviewing existing research, review drafts of your,
I think maybe
Projects?
we could take out that first bullet and just leave the last 2 bullets. There's staff to create some flood checklist and ECAAC to provide feedback.
Yeah.
Guidelines.
Yeah, that's good.
I have a question. In my work with the the hatchery, I was wondering about, as you're doing a Green Shores workshop, would you be willing to include something specific to that and a service of protecting the waterways and looking at some of the issues presently that are going on that I can see could actually help people understand better about how to protect what's going on, because there's some, concerns that are going on right now.
Well, the Green Shores workshop is quite a specific, it's in class and then a side, and it definitely has a structure to it where it's really looking at trying to offshore the ocean, like the ocean fronts. So it's quite a structured course. It's taught all over the province. So I don't know if that's the place for that. Are you talking about riparian areas or?
In a way, but there's just, I don't really know enough to speak specifically to it. I just know that I'm hearing and seeing things that are of concern.
Why don't we talk? Why don't we have a conversation about it? I might be able to. Yeah, like riparian areas, and Kaylee's going to be taking the course very soon as well. So we can keep an eye on that stuff. I understand your concern where it's coming, but I don't think the Green Shores is the avenue for that. But definitely keep bringing, because it is, these areas are so important, and there are areas of concern. So we can discuss offline, and we can definitely keep talking about riparian areas. And we will have a chance to comment on applications for subdivisions, rezonings in that context. Okay? Yeah.
Okay. Support the implementation of the parks plan, and that's review is what we'd be doing.
Yeah, I would love to at one point, and that's why I have ECAAC here, have one committee meeting where we go through and kind of just make people knowledgeable about the plan and take them through the plan, and
Yeah.
maybe, I think a lot of the recommendations are already in the works, but it just would be nice to do that.
Is the climate action strategy this?
No, it's David's document.
Okay. Going on.
Sorry, right. The one that I've been taking
Yeah.
to 2,000 committee.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're leaving that as it's standing? Yep. Okay, next one. Report to the climate.
Before we leave it, could we maybe change that? Because I didn't understand what it meant. I don't understand what it means, which is to hold a meeting to review ECAAC's role in these various things.
Thank you.
So maybe when there are no council referrals on the agenda or delegations,
Yeah.
the next meeting.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
So we have to remember that well.
Yes. Okay. Report to the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program. Summarize initiatives.
So
You
do
have
I-
to assist with summary. That's basically it.
Have the new members seen a report, the CARIP report? It was sent to you. I can send, thank you. Thanks.
When I first heard it, I was thinking carrot, the
I think
chocolate
carrots.
substitute. And I was going,
Carrots, it was.
okay,
And that's just a prescriptive requirement, so we have to leave that as is. Yeah?
Yep.
Same as the next one too, I think, eh?
yep, that's assist with preparation of new community energy and emissions plan.
Sorry, Mike,
Nope. Any changes in the assist with preparation of new community energy emissions plan? Nope. Okay. Ensure community energy emissions plan is implemented.
I see Bonnie's name.
Yep. Thank God you're here, Bonnie.
Yes.
Okay, continue climate conversations. I think there's a lot of scope for ideas and engagement here with the group. And, yeah, Bonnie?
Sorry,
No,
Will.
go ahead.
Maybe we could have it as an agenda item coming up and just, we've got some ideas and we can decide which ones we want to do.
Yeah. And let's keep it open too, if people have ideas, and there's gonna be topical things that will happen. We get another drug, we're gonna be talking, that end of climate conversations will be really important and topical. That sound good, one? I think you've come up with lots of good ideas on things already, and so I'm hoping you'll have ideas of topics for conversations.
Well, there's lots of ideas, it's just doing them.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, you know, we could have weekly or we could have monthly workshops.
and I think it's.
There's no shortage of
Yeah.
speakers.
Yeah, I think it's, it is to do with the capacity of staff to organize and get done. But,
I would think maybe 3, we could do 3, yeah, so maybe we as a committee we can decide.
If we could do them online.
Well, we've often video recorded the presentations that have been made, and they're posted on the website. Is that what you mean?
yeah, and Don, if you come across great examples of online presentations too, you know, we can look at new options too, if it's feasible.
There are many webinars that are offered through the federal and provincial government, and what we've done in the past, we haven't done it recently, is we've just circulated information for registration in those webinars. We're members of the Partners for Climate Protection, and we have reached 5 milestones in their program. I think we're at level 3 now. And they have a very good online sort of collaboration where you can, for example, bring up questions around climate action issues and get input from all across the country. So maybe we could consolidate some of those resources and see how they might tee up or not tee up with climate conversations.
Consolidate resources.
Consolidate a list of,
And Don, you mentioned Climate Hub as in one of your emails, and I think we might add that as a potential partner.
Yeah, and as I get updates from them, I'll just send them along. I mean, some of them are interesting.
Yeah.
would you like your name up there?
Sorry?
Would you like your name up
Did
there?
I volunteer?
Would you
I think
volunteer? I heard volunteer.
Sure.
I heard volunteer.
Yeah, I'm happy.
So
I heard it.
Sorry, what's that, sharing webinar?
Yeah.
Sharing
No,
webinar.
no. Maureen and Bonnie and Dawn
Yeah.
were residents.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing. And as far as the organizing, once you've got your speaker, it's basically having somebody with a key who can get into this building.
It's a tea
and
and coffee.
get tea and coffee and say hello and get involved. Yeah.
so. Looking at the time, are we in a position? Do we want to prioritize these things now, or have fun?
I don't know now, I'm just putting that there's do we need to prioritize? I feel like it's very manageable now.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to.
Yeah, and we'll prioritize them anyway
As
as we go.
So what would be really helpful is if people are okay, if the committee's okay with the work plan, we need to get it to council. And so we just look for a recommendation.
That the committee approved, that the committee approved the 2020 capital plan as amended
Yeah.
at its March 4th, which means the edits will be cleaned up.
Do we have-
Meeting and recommend that council receive it for information.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move that.
Seconder,
Second.
in favor?
Good work.
Yeah, I'm gonna abstain, because I mean, we missed some of those other things we were talking about that didn't get discussed or get on the list, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Unless I missed that.
Which other things are?
Well, the one, when we talked, I mean, the last meeting, we were talking about density, and and the issues around sustainability
stormwater.
and adaptability, and we were talking about water capacity on bond.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, those things seem kind of important.
Okay, that's what council is now working on,
It's part of the water,
part of the water.
and it's specifically.
So did that come out of
identifies-
last week's meeting?
Nope,
Okay.
it just was going along at the same time.
It's an island-wide master plan
Yeah.
that came as a result of the water, like the drought and blue water in the summer.
Yeah.
And it brought problems, stage 4 conservation in Eagle Cliff. They've decided to do a major look at what.
So if we put it on our action list, it would just be redundant.
Exactly,
That's right.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's been in the works for
Yeah.
how long,
Yeah.
9 months?
Yeah,
Just
and we'll be
moving on.
reviewing these too, and I think this is gonna be where we can definitely make sure that those concerns are met. You know, if we're not, if you read the draft plan and it's referred to us, well, if it's referred to us and you read it and you say, it needs more strength on the water retention and.
So we can come back at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But just,
Yeah.
again, not to take up more time, but the question was raised last meeting about how many people can the island sustain?
Yeah.
And somebody said, you know, it was a best guess that we could support 7,000 people. Is that part of the discussion with council?
No, not, they'll be looking at the water capacity and the water systems that we currently have and how adequate they are.
But that will tell you how many people it can support.
No, it
No.
won't, because it would depend on things like water usage
Yeah.
as well. So if you have a community of 7,000 that is very profligate when it comes to its water use, that's one community. You've got a community of 7,000 people who are very, very conservative about water use and also has cisterns and uses very little water in the garden. That's another community. So in terms of water, you could have, I'm pulling this out of the air, you could have a difference between enough water for 7,000 people or enough water for 10,000 people. So it's a very complex, nested batch of issues that have to be considered when you're answering that question. So
But-
all of the density
Okay.
discussions end up having to be very qualified.
But my question is, as long as those questions are being asked,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
we've done our job.
Yeah, and
I think so, keep
Yeah.
it's important stuff.
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that's really going to be important to our committee is not a specific number, but as Maureen was saying, we've got to look at sustainability. Is this a sustainable development? Is this and you know, I think it's going to require some things that we've been talking about, encouraging and enabling the development of comprehensive mapping of green infrastructure on the island and natural assets. That's the things that council and staff need to make decisions about, is this going to be sustainable? And I think that's one of the things we've got to keep in the back of our mind all the time. Okay?
Sorry, I'm total 180 here. One thing that I wanted to start looking at was looking at whether or not it would be possible to have a public charging station for people's vehicles when they come over and visit the island.
It's on its way.
Really?
So that's bought it already.
Yes.
It's purchased.
Yes, and we're looking at, it'll be done soon.
When, where?
It'll be down, you know, where the library parking lot is, yeah, at the back there, and not on the library side, but on the other side of that, and on the left-hand edge close to the.
Fantastic, okay, never
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
I'm too late to the
Great
table.
Yeah,
That
that's,
came out of the transportation committee and the transportation plan, and
Yeah.
it's been done.
and was strongly supported by ECAAC too.
Yeah.
So, um,
And
Yeah,
it
so-
was paid for by BC Hydro,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah,
so,
grant.
another item that we talked about was looking at or supporting, I guess, the transportation committee with electric ferries and having that discussion. Is that something that we want to add to our?
It is on here, so it's just a funny little,
Did
it's
we
hard
miss
to,
it?
it's there.
It's in the-
It's transportation, and it just says, support ongoing transportation initiatives, communicate with BIMTAC as appropriate. And so,
Okay.
The transportation committee, the ferry committee, everybody's been talking about that for a long time, banging our heads against BC ferries, but BC ferries is listening to some degree, but that conversation will go for a good while still. But
okay,
it's
it's an
certainly,
important one.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so,
Sorry,
go ahead.
another wish list, increasing bus service on the island to reduce our carbon footprint,
Yep.
servicing
It's-
Cowan
it's
and the
critical.
Gold.
It's critical, and so are you familiar with the Bone Transportation Society? Yes, no?
No,
Okay, that's the bus, I don't know if you commute downtown?
no, I'm stay-at-home
It's the
mom.
bus your husband's on every day.
Peter's
Peter
bus.
bus, come on, Peter bus.
You are familiar with it.
Yes.
He's not angry when he gets home.
The transit system has been the same on Bowen for 20 years. And, we've been arguing that it needs to extend to other areas of the island. And there are all kinds of issues for that from a GHG perspective, but also a land use perspective for parking in Snug Cove. How can we expect people to not park in Snug Cove if there's no other way of getting to Snug Cove? If they're commuting, for instance. So there's all kinds of reasons that we need to improve our bus service, and Bowen Transportation Society is hoping to be able to take over the on-island contract next year. So this is all going on the transportation side of things.
Okay,
And
so we don't need to offer any support or anything?
I'd be happy to support it every way you can, but it's not an action item necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, and we are referred to any of the actions that the Transportation Committee is doing that is environment related. So coming up is David's going to give a report from the Transportation Committee. So we get that information at every meeting of what they're doing. And so we can make motions of support for things if necessary. And yeah. So I'm going to go back to the motion.
Right.
Have we won you over?
Oh, yeah. I'm just gonna be quiet.
Just so you know,
I don't like
abstaining is,
that.
I vote in the
You
affirmative.
say what you need to say. I'm just finding where it is.
That the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee approve the 2020 ECAAC work plan as amended at its March 4th, 2020 meeting, and recommend that council receive it for information.
Do we have a motion?
Yep, it's been moved and seconded.
And voted.
Voting in favor? Okay. Climate Action Revenue Program.
Could I suggest that we defer this one to the next meeting? There's no urgency.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But the next one is vital. Frog
It
Day.
just takes two, and this is just, so these are our, this is, I showed you but tomorrow we're going to see the kids, so we're doing so that's, she's,
Do we get that? Can I take two from my
I was
kids?
gonna give you two.
Thank you. Jeff, are your kids
I'll
big?
take one.
Oh, one, okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Kids are huge.
Yeah.
I think that's fabulous.
Do you want one?
So I get to keep
You get to keep
Oh,
one. This is your gift,
it's
this
so
is you
cool.
join the ECAAC and.
Okay, Bonnie, we want some frog jokes.
Oh, why did the frog cross the road?
Oh,
Because
he was told
You told.
We was told to.
But the
Oh,
basic,
yeah.
the basic joke of why would the frog cross the road to get to the other side is actually perfect, because this is about frog crossing.
Yeah.
So while we're on frogs, I've got an update that I should have, it just occurred to me that I should have circulated, because I don't know the answer to this. But Metro Vancouver, in what Metro Vancouver does every year is they have some sustainability funds where they can apply to new innovations. One of them is doing DNA analysis of streams to determine what creatures live in streams. And what they're looking for, and I should have circulated the video, is 2 different frogs, I believe. And this hasn't been done before. And maybe those frogs are important for us, and maybe they won't be doing it for our streams, but we could possibly expand it to that. Anyway, I'll circulate the video to everybody. It's a Metro Vancouver video. It's really cool, and it's a way to find out what creatures are living up your streams without having to go hunting for them and shocking them and hurting them and doing all kinds of things like that. You just take a little glass
Water
of water,
sample,
a
yeah.
water sample, and analyze it.
Yeah, they've been doing that in the Lower Mainland now, I think, the last 2 or 3 years as part of their inventory prior to development. They'll take a water sample and run DNA on it, sequencing, and I think they're looking for red-legged frogs and maybe tailed frogs,
It might be those two. I
the
don't know.
listed species.
Yeah, the Metro is doing, they're going to look at species that hadn't had no, I don't know the proper word, the ability to test those species before, so they're developing new tests. Like this work has mostly been done by UVic, the initial work.
I've got the video, I'll send it around. It says coastal cutthroat trout, red-legged frogs,
Yeah.
coastal tailed frogs,
Yeah.
and Pacific water shrew.
It's not accepted methodology in Alberta, though. For some reason, the Alberta government's digging their heels back.
We don't want to find out about those creatures.
It might be.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Well, it's new, it's a new technology.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
and they've been doing that in oceans too, to identify fish species. So, and yeah, don't have to catch fish to know what's in there. Any more on Frog Day?
Nothing on frog, but I'm next up with transportation. I'll just be really quick about one cool thing. Last time I talked about bicycle safety, one of the things that we were working on and doing, it's great to be able to do a multi-use path, but we can't do multi-use paths for all of our roads. We just don't have the right of way and all kinds of things. So one of the things that we're trying to do is encourage people to leave cars, so with 1 meter, so a 1 meter gap from people who are riding on bikes. And so we could, develop a sign and have a sign on the road, but, signs pretty well disappear pretty quickly in terms of your imagination, because once you've seen it 5 times, you forget about it. And so what we've done instead is developed something that will go down on the road that is life-sized. And it's a great big, let's call it a painting. And it attaches to the road, and it is a woman on her bike from behind, and she's riding along, and then there's a big arrow that says 1 meter, and then there's the edge of a car. But it's life-sized, it will go right on the road, and you'll notice it. And we're planning on doing this for that bike to work week in May, I think it is, because our school gets quite involved in the bike. And so we'll, put it on one road in the morning and another road.
What about people in the ditch?
I know, it'll be, because you'll drive right over it. You'll drive right over the side of it. It's really quite, you've seen it probably. It's fantastic, isn't it?
Can I show it, or is that in the
It's really good.
It's really
It's
good.
really good.
Anyway, you'll see it.
It's really good.
Let's move on.
Can I show what, is that gonna wreck things, or?
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
okay, perfect.
Even failing, it's sort of thing like failing.
The drama of it all. It's dark. We can't see her.
Oh my god, no, it's the computers.
She's dressed in black.
She's dressed in black.
Oh,
Okay, very good. So imagine, this is life size.
It's on the
So
ground.
She's life size, it's on the ground, on the road, driving right on the edge. And it's pretty great. This thing will stay on the road, it'll be durable, you can't leave it forever, you let it take it up after a few hours and move it somewhere else.
Have you talked to the RCMP?
I haven't, but I presume Emma has them.
Oh, I don't know.
Whoa.
Okay,
So that's from transportation.
That's May, that's in May. It's
In May,
May,
well, yeah, when it gets, once it's light and it's not raining,
Yeah,
and
very
when the kids are riding to school, it's really quite an interest, it's a pretty great initiative, and so that's when we sort of launch it.
Maureen?
Those two items are included in the
Yeah.
agenda package. You can just take a glance at
Yeah.
page 14 and 15.
Draft conservation development policy.
Okay, so I'm going to speak to this a little bit because we've got in, this is the third week that this has been discussed at this committee, and we need to get this done. I realized what was happening is, there's a background report, that's, 10, 15 pages long, whatever. But I realized, just a sec, why are we spending all this time on the background report? The background report was a presentation to council to try to get an understanding of what this is all about. It was done by the Advisory Planning Commission. So I emailed Daniel and say, Daniel, what are you actually looking for? And what it's looking for is simply the policy. Because the policy is what becomes policy. And so do we want any changes to the policy? And looking at the policy, it is fairly general, and there is
It's
an
on
opportunity.
page 27 of your packet.
Yeah, so it's got 5 at A, B, C, D, E. So yesterday at the Transportation Committee, instead of E, furtherance of the municipality's transportation policies, they actually got into a little bit more detail to say they were looking, that what the municipality would be looking for from the developer would be, and I don't remember the exact words, doesn't matter, something like furtherance of an integrated active transportation network and things of that sort. Yeah. So in other words, they thought of the efforts, the essence of the transportation plan, and slapped that in there so that it became a bit more specific. Now, that's a recommendation that goes to Daniel, and Daniel will look at it in terms of how general and how specific policy should be. So we can
Daniel
make
is
some-
our planner,
Or is
so-
our planner, yeah. So we could do the same thing here, where you look at A, an analysis of the extent and value of existing natural features. It's a very general statement, it doesn't really get into the details of that at all. If we want to, we could add additional details. B, so the development will be judged by the efficacy of the means by which natural areas and natural capital will be permanently and irrevocably protected and maintained. So what the developer could come up with and say, they could say, well, we're planning to turn this into a park.
Page 20.
Yeah. A park that will be protected forever. Or they could say, well, we'll covenant it. Or they might say something else. Or they might have a conservation organization that would look after it from time to time. But the permanent and irrevocably, the point of those words were to say, well, that's what matters. But,
Sorry.
Page 28.
you don't have it?
Page 20.
So, page 13 of the policy document.
Right at the end of the policy document.
Sorry.
Found it?
Okay,
Got it?
sorry.
And then, cluster development and municipalities, housing policies. So we talk about housing policies and of our business. But, so certainly I turn it back to Will, but happy with the explanation that I got from Daniel to sort of make our job a bit simpler here.
Yeah, I was thinking that we should, in our interest as ECAAC, we should highlight that the parks plan, the transportation plan, and the climate change strategy should be referred to in all these developments, so that a developer looking at this policy would have to go and look at those 3 documents that have had a whole bunch of community input. And so it's a community speaking. And so the word would be, if you want to do a development, this kind of development, have a look at these 3 documents and show us how it's going to fit into these major policy documents. And for staff, if they are looking at, or if they've been referred to approve a development, they would be looking at those 3 documents and using that as kind of the checklist. Does this really fit the community's needs? So that's my suggestion from the point of view of the, and if there's other documents, and I think we also, I was talking to Bonnie and she was saying, well, what if there's other documents that come up later? I think we'd put in words like, and other municipal plans related to climate and the environment. So that would cover anything new that we don't have right now.
And I think, I was just thinking from what Will said, a way that could be handled in this, rather than that becoming an F or whatever, it would just be a little paragraph at the bottom or maybe above that would say, in considering these points, the proponent should, and I'm not getting the right words, but should review the parks plan, the transportation plan, and the climate change plan to, or something of that sort.
Could you say that again, David?
I was seeing it, other people might have another idea. It could be a little paragraph after all these points that in, and we don't need to have the exact words,
Yeah.
you know, but it's that in reviewing these points, I'm just saying it would help understand these points by reviewing these 3 documents of the climate change plan, the parks plan, and the transportation plan. But we need better words than that. It's too late now.
And I think Daniel, as I say, Daniel will
You'll
take
come up with that.
everything and
Yeah.
see
It'll
it.
probably come back, wouldn't it?
After, I don't know, probably.
You think?
Well, it'll go, after this, a new version will go to council. Council might accept it or might say, let's send it to everybody again. I don't know.
I think also another thing is that the, in point E, that the extent of the neighbors needs to be defined. That neighbors could be someone within a watershed, someone within that area, because, I mean, any development upstream within a watershed can affect downstream.
Yes.
So I think the extent of neighbors needs to be clarified.
Would it be helpful too, and that just reminded me, with the water management, water master plan, we should refer that in that list that David was working on. And that would help emphasize that that watershed concept.
That's right. Because you need to look at, it's not just the immediate neighbors that may be affected by the, the noise development, but it's also a bigger impact. And then a cumulative impact too, all within that watershed.
To keep it simple, I'm wondering is it possible that this could say to encourage a collaborative approach between developers, the municipality, neighbors, or others affected by a proposed development? It's open to interpretation of what others means, but it does at least stimulate, what other possible affected people could there be?
Yeah.
So, Jake, so add others.
Yeah.
Remembering one other thing that Jeff suggested way back 2 meetings ago, instead of conservation development, conservation-oriented development. Changing the name to conservation-oriented development would make it a little less confusing, see less like an oxymoron.
Well, may I ask, so we received that list of all our past discussion items. Steph, did you put that together?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is the 3rd meeting and lots of emails, so I
Yeah.
just collected whatever I have to try to help support the next step.
I think,
It's yours on this, there.
of course, there's lots of them, and we would spend a lot of time probably rehashing
Don't do that.
each of them individually. But as kind of to David's point, many of them do kind of speak to the background material anyway. I think the points are highly relevant, and we may have varying levels of support for any individual one, but nevertheless,
points and.
The
Yeah.
points and the
Yeah,
cases were made for each of them,
consolidation.
and many of them don't speak to the wording of the policy itself, and we've just put a couple of new items in there now anyway that do. I would be prepared to accept those as discussion points from the committee. Is it recommendations? I'm not sure if that's the right word.
Provide some really good feedback.
Points from
Yeah,
the committee.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Only problem is I didn't realize that Michaela's email was referring, I thought it was referring to points in the policy, but I realized referring to points in the will. So there might be a bit of
Yeah.
double dipping in there,
But we can
but to clean it up.
Yeah, or, I mean, Dan, I mean, as I say too, Dan is gonna consolidate all this,
Okay.
and if he needs any clarity, I mean, I'm gonna be involved too at some
Okay.
level, so, yeah.
Did the point that I made about the riparian areas and the fire smart sort of make sense? Where it came up, I actually have a drainage that comes across the back of my property, and my husband and I have been looking at implementing the fire smart policy. And so radiating out from the house, you clear out all sorts of vegetation, and then after a certain buffer, then you do more. We would essentially be clearing all the understory from the creek, and in some cases, some of the overstory as well, which is a direct conflict with the riparian areas regulation.
Yeah.
And as a biologist, I know that. So then, I don't believe there's any sort of ratification between those two things.
Yeah.
And what's,
The province is working on some they're working on trying to reconcile this variation. So in the works with the new wrapper.
so I think some of that wording needs to relate
Right.
back to that and sort of dump that on the province's lap.
Yeah, and Bonnie, aren't they, is the province recognizing the huge difference between coastal rainforest and interior forest for fire smart issues? Because they're different.
Yeah, so we are working, Sue and Fast and Jen, our emergency coordinator, who's at Fire Smart, and Councillor Fast has put some really good points together. So we're going to be working together on educational material, and we're going to highlight that. And there is some research out there. So definitely we acknowledge that, and we would be highlighting that in any educational materials.
The Fire Smart program has no standing as a policy though,
No.
does it?
Whereas,
Whereas riparian
Riparian,
does.
riparian
Have
trumps fire
regulatory.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure.
definitely, yeah.
yeah.
Can I just add a couple of little points and a few questions? The applicability section, where it says for other development approval. What is other development?
I don't know where I, Maureen.
So page 12 of the policy, page 27 of the agenda.
Yeah, just right at the bottom. Here.
I don't seem to have that on mine, I don't know why. Yeah, yeah.
What other development?
Oh, under the statement of intent,
I don't know what they are. I guess that's,
That-
you don't
that's-
have to answer, I just don't know what they are.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
And then,
mean, basically,
It's
when
probably,
when you've got leverage, it's that rezoning is when you've got leverage. We don't, subdivision approval is far less leverage. So,
yeah, but if this is supposed to be providing guidance to a developer,
yes.
they're gonna wanna know. I mean, it says rezoning subdivision, that's clear.
Yeah.
Other development approval, what other development approval is gonna be their question. And then under, sorry, Steve.
I'll take that, I'll make a note of this to try to
Yeah,
get
I
rid of
think
that
so,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
In
Okay.
the conservation development, little
Clear.
paragraph,
Yeah.
nowhere in this policy does it mention conservation covenants. And conservation covenants are presumably the tool by which conservation-oriented development
One
would
of
be.
the tools.
One of
Yeah.
them, okay.
Yeah.
So this is a spot where it's easy to include that. This is achieved by identifying and permanently protecting ecologically sensitive and
Yes.
valuable
Really
areas
important.
through conservation covenants. Because it's gotta be in there.
Yeah.
Sorry, where was that?
So it's on the page, it's under conservation development, definition.
Oh, okay.
And then there's a language tweak that
Yeah, and,
I'll suggest.
and you'd say conservation development and other needs, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Just, sorry,
Covenant,
yeah, covenants.
Okay, we're getting punchy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, my record has been defeated, we're not ending on time.
You are not leaving this room until I get this recommendation.
No, no,
from next
The
policy.
recommendation, yeah, the recommendation. I know Daniel will be very happy to
Yeah.
move forward.
So I think I think it's time for the motions. Any other discussion though? Did you want to read to the top of number three? So the motion would be that the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee support or not support the draft, well, let's try support for first. The draft conservation development policy as presented on March 4th, 2020, with the following comments. And we've got those.
So moved.
Second, Bonnie, favor?
Oh my God.
We have made a step stay. Okay. I guess that's it.
I think that's it.
Good work. That was great.
Discussed, yeah, that was,
That was good, that was
I
good.
love my pen.
yes, it's very
I
cute,
wish,
nicely
no, I
done.
wish I
Yeah.
could gifts every time.
It's very cool.
I've got to
Good,
tell you,
well, good to
Bonnie,
see you.
I grew up catching frogs as friends of mine, and I still, when I see a frog when I'm walking, if I can hold a frog in my hand, I'm so
You're so
happy. And then you let the frog go and it goes off on its, on the rest of its life, and has this story to tell its friends
There
of
you
this
go.
encounter with a monster.
Sasquatch. You're very frog-like
Yes,
tonight.
yes,
You're very coordinated.
I somehow knew, yes.
Permitted. I think that's permitted. I think the kids will be.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.